In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the new lens blur tool in Adobe Lightroom. This tool enables you to blur a background, and I'm going to give you an in-depth tour of what it does and how you can use it. So you can also find this in Adobe Camera Raw, and it works exactly the same. So if you want to find this, just click on the Develop module and you'll see that the lens blur is right down near the bottom, and you can see there it is here. So you will notice as well it says early access, so it is still in develop mode, but it still does a good job. So the first thing you want to do is click apply, and AI will automatically detect the subject and then blur the background for you. Depending on your computer, this may take a couple of seconds, it may take a little bit longer, and file size has a lot to do with it as well. The first setting you'll see is blur amount. So if you increase this to the right, you are then going to increase the blur on the background, and if you drop this down, you'll see there that the blur becomes less. So I'm just going to double click and that will reset it to 50, which is the default. And just remember, with this particular tool, less is always more. If you want a realistic looking image, then you're far better to just add a little bit of blur. So you'll notice here on focal range that we have a little person here. So what this will do, if we click on that, that will automatically detect the subject for us. And then next to that you have the target. So we can actually change where we want this to be sharp. So by selecting the target, we can then click on something else. So if I wanted this tree, for instance, to be sharp, then you can see by clicking on that, it's now made the foreground out of focus and that background sharp. And then we can just click back onto the subject, and that will make the subject sharp and the background. So you can select anywhere within the picture with that. You can also just click on the subject and it will automatically go back to the default selection. You can also adjust the blur by moving this slider. So you can see here, as I move that to the right, that is going to make the background sharp and the foreground soft. And as I move this slider to the middle, it's going to start bringing the foreground and make it sharper. So you can see as I bring this forward, you can see there eventually our foreground and giraffe is now sharp. And again, we can just click on the subject for it to go back to the default setting. Now what is really cool with this is that you can decrease and increase the depth of field. So if I was to click and drag on the right side, you can see that actually I push that all the way up, that everything is now sharp. So everything from the giraffe, the tree, all the way down, right back to the trees in the background. Now if I start bringing this back down, you'll see that that depth of field is becoming shallower and shallower, and to the point where I can almost mimic a f1.4 2.8 lens, and I can be very, very specific about where I want this to be sharp. So you can be really, really precise and just select areas that you want. So you can increase the front and you can increase the back as well. So you can see what that's doing. So very, very cool. Lots and lots of options there. So let's just click back onto the default setting. Now what you'll see here is a graph, and this is a depth graph. You can see that there is white colors at the very, very front, and it goes into yellow, and then all the way to the back there it goes into purple. So the left hand side represents how close it is to us, and the right hand side represents how far away. So the lighter the color, the closer it is to us. And Adobe have created this visualized depth map, which is really, really interesting. So if we click on that, you'll see that the graph will actually now appear and you can visualize where that depth is. So as I said before, anything that is white and then into yellow is going to represent closest to us. And then as we move along to the right, you can see there that anything that is purple is going to be further away. So us changing this slider, we're changing where that blur amount is. So again, if I click on the default there, you can see that we know that this is sharp because this is yellow. This is a little bit further away because it's orange, and then at the back here, all this purple is at the very, very back and is out of focus. So I'm just going to turn off this visualize depth checker and just look at the picture, and you can see that we do have a couple of problems here. So this area here is blurry. We may want to bring that back in. We may want to make this top half blurry. There might be a few little lines around here, so there's some blur going on here and some down here. So we might want to change some of these. So the visualize depth is going to help you with that. So let's turn it back on. And you'll see underneath here it says refine. So if we click on that little arrow, it drops down and we have a focus and blur option. So we can select what we want to do. So at the minute these are blurred, so we need to bring them closer to us. So let's click on focus. You have the amount here, you have the size of the brush, you have the feather, and you have the flow. So the amount is going to be how much blur or focus we want to bring in. So let's make our selections first. So let's start painting down here. So I'm painting around this area here. And what we want to do is then adjust the amount. So we can then start increasing that, and you'll see that that will start to bring that forward. So if I turn the visualize depth off, you'll see now that that has now brought that back. So you can use this without the visualize depth. You can do it by eye. So for instance, down here, I can zoom in and I can just start painting that back in. And what you'll notice as well is that I've dropped the flow. If you have it quite high, then it's going to be the same as when you use the brush tool. It's going to be quite a severe edit. So you may want to be blending certain areas. So it's always a good idea just to drop that a little bit. So you can see there visually now, that's fine, that's worked. So it's given us the same result. Let's turn this visualize depth back on, and you'll see there that the areas have become more yellow rather than sort of this mid purple area there. So I can continue to paint in these areas. And again, let's turn the visualize depth off and you'll see the result there. So that looks pretty good. And there's another little bit here. Let's turn this visualize depth on, and you can see there it's more of a purple color. So we want to start bringing that back in, just so we get a bit of a better selection. And let's paint this bit in as well. There we go. And also we can see where the tail is here. So what we want to do is actually bring this tail back in. So let's click on this tail, and you'll see here that I've got quite a small brush, so I can be really, really precise with the selection that I'm making. Okay, so let's bring the flow down, and let's just start painting in some of this area here where the tail is. There we go. So I can hold the Alt or Option key down, and you'll see that it's now gone to minus. So if I make a mistake, I can come and just paint that back in and just bring that focus away from the tail. So let's select the visualize depth, and you'll see what I've done there. So we may need to just refine the edges a little bit. You can see up here. Yeah, but it's just to give you an understanding of what is going on and how we can make this look a little bit more realistic. So you could blur that part, or just to make life easier, I'm just going to bring that back into focus. So I'm just going to bring all of that, and you'll see that when I jump back again, you'll see that that is actually all now become more of a yellow color rather than a purple color. So you can see there. Okay, so I hope that's made sense. I hope that's given you an idea of how to actually use that. So we can continue refining any of these areas. So up here, this doesn't look right. We want to bring that back into focus. So let's just start painting that in. And again, like I said earlier, it's always a good idea, in my opinion, just to drop the flow down and to just paint in that area in a circle motion. It's just going to give you a better blend, especially when you're around the edges here. Auto mask selected is always going to help us. It's going to help us mask out the subject, so get a better finish. So now we've done that, we can push the flow up because we've done the edges, and I can start then just being a bit more severe with these areas here. And as you can see, as I keep painting, it's going from an orange to a yellow, so it's really bringing that forward. So let's take the visualize depth off, and you'll see that that should be absolutely fine now, which it is. So we could also use the blur tool if we want to blur anything out. For instance, if we've got some areas here, we can see that we may need to just blur out some of them, so we can just paint them in just to get a better selection. And again, the auto mask is selected, which is going to help us just get a better finish. So for instance, this here, we can just blur this out. Now what you'll also find is when you're doing this, and if you're halfway through something, it won't necessarily look correct. It will look a bit messy. But it's just because you've not finished off the whole of the selection. So keep with it, and once it's finished, it will look natural. There we go. So let's turn this visualize depth on again, just to help us with this selection up here. So you can see that up here, all of this tuft of tree is sharp, and I may just want to get rid of that. So I'm just going to start brushing that in and just make it a little bit thicker, bit of a bigger brush. There we go. I'm just going to push that flow up now and just start painting in. And what you'll see is that I'm moving from left to right, up and down. I'm just going in all different angles just to try and completely separate that. So that you can still see there's a few bits in there. So let's turn the visualize depth off just to see where we're at, and then we can refine it even more. So there we go, you can see just down here. And that looks a little bit better. Okay, so that is how you use it. It's a pretty nifty tool, isn't it? So let's just look now on here. We can increase and decrease this blur amount a little bit more now if we want to. So we can increase this up. And like I said in the beginning, that less is always more, especially with pictures like this, because if we increase it too much, it's just not going to look correct. Now, one thing I want to show you is that, as you can see here, I'm trying to increase and decrease this. Sometimes you may still be stuck on this, so you just need to click back onto whatever it was you were doing. So for instance, the focus there, and now this will work. Sometimes if you don't do that, then trying to move this, nothing happens. So that could be one of the reasons why. And you can see the before and after here. So I click on the eye, there's the before, and there's the after. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.